Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. For the first time in 5 years, I am filming in an alternate location in my backyard because it's a very windy day today. It's extremely beautiful and warm. Walked on the beach today. And right around this corner is got this little quarantine area where it's 1/10 of everything else is going on around here. So you might get a little bit of wind in the mic, but should be fairly controllable. So I got a lot of exciting subjects coming your way, for sure. Today's subject is just one of those subjects which I find near and dear to my heart because I see it being the flaw of others around me. I debate myself on whether or not to engage it ever. And it's about getting credit for what you do. It's a weird thing. It's, there's some things that are just blatant in your face, how to manage certain things. And then there are things like getting credit for something. But this could apply to you to help your life get better in terms of managing your own desires for such a thing. Or we're going to flip it and we're going to talk about letting other people get credit and making sure they get credit and managing people who need to always get credit for things. It can be very nauseating. It can be very boring. It can seem like the priorities of the situation are upside down when someone really needs a bunch of credit. But it's a weird thing, isn't it? Isn't it weird that we need credit for things sometimes, Like, I did that. That was me. I did that. And because you toiled, typically. I guess we're jumping in here. I don't want to jump in just like a cannonball into the swimming pool, but when you are doing something that is fairly extraordinary for your particular history of things that you have done, and this, I want you to think about this as a little kid, your son or your daughter who are doing something amazing, and then you doing something amazing, let's say your 30s, 40s, 50s, you realize every passage of time that happens, every decade that goes by, that bar of what is amazing gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Well, I did this when I was young, and then I did that when I was this. And so it when you blow things away, you notice something. You notice something very in particular. And I think this is a big part of why credit seems to really be desired in a particular setup. And it goes like this. While you're working extraordinarily hard, you are noticing that the rest of the world's not working that hard. At least in your perception. Now, it's not that they're not working 8 hours a day. It's just you're working 12 and you're working in some area of creation that is tumultuous. It is unforgiving. It is super demanding. You may be perhaps doing something that no one has ever done in world history, or you're doing something that maybe no one in your family has done, no one in your community has done, maybe in your country. And it's all of these elements that tend to stack up, whereby a person wants to get credit. Because when you establish yourself as a capable person of any discipline, right, you tend to have doors open up. And it's a beautiful thing. People will be like, oh, that's the smart person. Get them in here. They're the first person on the list at our party. Because we want to learn smart things. We want to know what they're working on next. Why are celebrities celebrities? And you have some that are just rich, and because they have money, they have power, and people will invite them to milk them. But when they're not rich, or they weren't rich before, we like them because they can portray fictional characters inside the silver screen. We like them where they can write and perform a song that blows our mind, etc., etc. A Tesla who invents things that we can barely conceive of. I mean, do you realize how mind-blowing Tesla was? Just as a small digression, I want you to think about this for a split second. We understand today radio waves because we were raised with radio waves. But this dude created radio waves. created an antenna to receive those waves, modulated those into information packets such that he could create a remote control car in the 1890s with instruction sets about how to turn, stop, go backwards, forwards. No big deal today. But he's the first guy in the world to do it. And everyone's just like, yeah, whatever. I go down to Radio Shack and get one of those. Mm-hmm. He invented the unconceived. Tesla was a man that liked to get credit, but he seemed to, in my research, there seemed to be a trigger for him wanting credit. He didn't need to walk out and say, look at me, look at me. That's Einstein's game. Invent nothing, steal everything, take credit for all. Tesla would only want credit, it would appear, if someone else was about to take credit for his accomplishment. Or if someone was walking up to him, and this is a big one for all of us, right? Let's say that you have done some amazing things in your life. Maybe several amazing things in your life. But you only need one. You only need one amazing thing for this to occur. Let's say you worked in a particular discipline of some sort. And life goes by. You're still an expert at that thing. Oh, it might have evolved a little bit, but you know, about a 10-minute refresher course, you'll be back up on everything. And you were really good at whatever that thing was. And I want to keep it as generic as possible so you can see that thing that you know that you have in your brain. And then you get in a conversation and someone starts to sort of meander around in their lost consciousness with the subject matter that you're an expert in. And so you're sitting there going, oh, I get it. This person doesn't know what I know and doesn't know that I'm an expert in that. So we'll let them ramble on for a little while until we help them clarify what it is they appear to want to know. I mean, you don't even know what they want to know until you help them talk. And then you feel like you should validate yourself to them in the conversation. Well, funny you should mention that is how you go, and you're like, I used to do that for like 20 years. In fact, I was one of the first people to ever do that. Oh, really? Now, at this point, you'll have a fork in the road with the individual you're talking to. This happens at the cigar lounge all the time. You will have someone have an ego problem. And so what ends up happening is you tell them that you're an expert in something, and they absolutely did not walk into this room to find an expert. They wanted to be sort of the hearsay expert. And so they'll just kind of look off, find a reason to talk to someone else in the room. Happens all the time, man. All the time. And that's usually your guy in the late 40s up. Is that kind of fragile little diaper bottom person, right? What I find is the kids that are really interested in digging in and finding out everything that you know to add it to their own quiver of knowledge are all your sort of 20 to 30 guys. Maybe some 40s, but really hungry in the 20s and 30s. They're idealistic. They understand that, hey, they want to accomplish a bunch of cool things in life. And so, hey, if I can bum some information off some old dude smoking a cigar, well, let's do it. And maybe I'll even change my mind. Maybe I'll double down on this venture. Maybe that guy will tell me something that goes, ooh, really? Okay. All right, maybe I'll factor that in as I make a decision about where I want to major in college or what job I should apply for, that sort of thing. I tend to be that's rarely occurred where I'm actually guiding someone career-wise without them soliciting me for that service because, I don't know the whole story, right? But there's a weird thing. You can see the credit system, and don't get it confused with what's going on in China. You can see the need for credit in little kids' faces. And maybe you have a pretty vivid memory of your childhood and you're like, oh yeah, I remember when, my best friend tried to claim that he did what I did or she did what I did. And then, or my brother or my sister tried to take credit for what I did. And then when you do something wrong, you don't mind someone taking credit for it, right? There's this weird thing. This is what I'm trying to get to with you guys, which is if we don't want to suffer from this, and if we don't want to be triggered by someone seemingly overdoing it, then we have to understand the emotion. I will tell you that when I got into the game business, actually, let me back up one step. So, I got in the software business first, working on TurboTax in 1987. And it seemed like that product was super appreciated. No matter who called up on tech support phone call, because everyone had to do tech support when this tax season came around, except for maybe the super hardcore programmers, which were not going to be good talking to the customers. But almost everyone else. And I was ambidextrous in that realm. So anyway, that's how I got hired. Then I went into development 3 months later and then just circled around for support, which I always thought was great because I got to talk to customers and find out what the hell they liked about the product. But it seemed like TurboTax, which was going under two different names at the time, was being appreciated. Like, people were having their minds blown with this product. Oh my God, I can't believe I just WYSIWYG on the screen. It's 1987. It prints perfect tax forms. They don't look weird. They don't look computerized. It's phenomenal, blah, blah, blah. Now, fast forward a couple of years, I get in the video game business. First thing I do is draw. Then, probably about 3 years later, I get into electronic arts. And there was this interesting thing that we noticed, which was you will make an amazing game. You will work 2 to 3 years on a game. Some games don't do that. I mean, electronic arts, by 1993, you got games that people bring in the door that are pretty much finished. We just need to polish them out, maybe do some level design, and they're done in 6 months. Someone else has already worked maybe a year or two before they brought it to us. So in our brains, it's only 6 months old. But then there are other games that take years and years and years to create. And then you will see a kid play the game in a test session. And, they're just like anywhere from 12 to 25. And they just play your game like, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah, whatever. It's pretty good. Yeah. It's like hundreds of people have slaved over this thing. It must be the same thing when you create a film. You got a crew of like 300 people. And someone says, you got an Avatar. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's like, it's this landmark movie that makes more money than God. And, whatever. There's an interesting thing when any of you have known about people that work in amusement parks. They always tell you, hey, man, when you go behind the scenes of an amusement park, you lose a lot of the magic of the park. It's just a true thing. But at the same time, you start gaining new metrics of appreciation, which is, oh my God, look at how, Space Mountain's actually put together when the lights come on. I've been on Space Mountain once where something happened and the ride stops. I mean, I think it's going 30 miles an hour at least. And it just stopped really quickly and the lights came on. And I got to see what it looked like inside. And it was like a bluish gray paint. And it was spick and span. I was towards the bottom of the tank that it's inside, this bubble that it's in. And I'm looking around. It's just phenomenal, right? So it's a lot of times when you get into games, you lose the magic of the video game. Like you're definitely done playing it by the time it releases. But there's so much appreciation for, like when you see a great film and you look at, the Marvel Endgame, 1 and 2. Once you understand special effects, you understand the writers, the producers, the actors, the agents, how much the agents have pissing matches for who can be on camera the most, You're just amazed these things ever come together. It's really phenomenal. So there's credit that needs to be given for the sake of employment and validation to get higher levels of employment, right? Take a professor. Very traditional job whereby you accelerate through a particular university. You get the perhaps highest degree you could get. You start writing papers. It starts releasing. Okay, great. Based on the reception of that particular paper, some other college with more money might look at what you've done and say, let's get that guy into Harvard. Let's get that guy into Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, Yale, whatever. It'll also reflect on how you get grants. Grants are free money and never pay it back. You're supposed to yield something, but sometimes that doesn't even happen. Okay. The weird thing is if you don't have a little bone in your body to promote yourself, you could be this amazing person, and no one's ever going to notice. And on one level, not a gloating level, not an ego level, but on a confidence level and a sheer mathematical kind of itemization of what you're capable of doing, you must let the world know what you can do. And if you're like me, you've got this anti-ego thing. It just makes you want to puke. Now, I can play with you guys and act a particular way, whatever. I'm this guy. I'm really this dude right here. There's some other emotions, like I said in a previous episode recently. Yeah, you don't get to see me in every single scenario, but I'm not much different than this. But I'll come into a room, I'll come into the smoke lounge or something, and if you were sitting there smoking, I might have like a funny quip out of my mouth just to shock the entire room. I like that kind of stuff. It's entertaining, it's a non sequitur, shakes up your brain. Hopefully I can make you laugh. Now I want to tell you a story about working at Electronic Arts. And I said this a couple times out of context of this exact subject, and I think it'll be much more impactful for you today and potentially useful for you in an employment capacity, which also applies to universities, right? So I consult around the hallways of Electronic Arts for 6 years. I'm working at other companies. I got my own company. I'm in and out just doing little jobs. And then I activate full-time in 1999, like April 1st, to be honest. And I get just battlefield promotions. Everyone's quitting within this online division. I just keep assimilating all their employees to the point where it blew up huge. So I got this big-ass department, 55 people. Plus I'm in charge of 2 other divisions, which is pretty much the whole floor past the elevator, which is a big skyscraper. So probably like 70, 80 people at some point. But here comes the new knowledge that AOL, our partner in this online EA.com division, has lied through their teeth in the contract, saying that they had 20 million consecutive players a month, and that was going to be the basis of our online gaming platform, and they only had 2. Gross negligence within a contract. I don't know why we didn't sue them to death, but instead they start laying off, for the very first time in Electronic Arts history, both studio people where I started and the online division where I am now. Now, we've got people in the company that don't do anything, okay? They just walk around and talk. That's all they do. It is unbelievable. You pin them down. Everything that they did was just a phone call away. And they're not even senior people. They're not VPs or anything. So there was 3 big layoffs. The last one was everyone but like a few dozen people, and that's the one I got clipped in. I ended up working back in studio, Westwood Studios in Vegas. So I was flying from San Francisco to Vegas 2 or 3 times a week, which I love because Westwood Studios with Castle and Sperry, just a fantastic company. But here comes all these layoffs. And it comes down to that last batch of folks. And through the grapevine, I heard this one dude and a few people like him were kept on. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, okay, I know everyone. I mean, I was there when it was a 20-man team. It was my team, was the whole team. And then they ended up hiring other VPs to build other groups of folks. And this one guy he's a very nice person. I don't mean to be disparaging to him, and I'll never say his name on the episode, of course. But he managed to stay on because he went around talking to everyone constantly and dropping, this is what I've done, this is what my department is, and this is what I've done, this is what the department's done. And by the time they came down to laying people off, he had programmed their perception of him because the higher-ups don't know what anybody does. They don't even understand the technology. I mean, they only understand it at a basic level. So they were like, oh, that guy, we got to keep that dude. Now, here's the funny thing. After laying off all the doers, the funny part was there was no one left to do any work. Well, imagine that problem. We got a bunch of stuff we need to get done. Oh, yeah, well, there's no one for me to call anymore because you laid them all off. Well, I thought you keep telling me how great you are. Why don't you just roll up your sleeves and get it done? Yeah, well, sort of kind of, hey, look over there. And the guy runs away because he doesn't know how to do anything. Everything that this guy knew was all theoretical. And there's power in theoretical management. It's like I'm sure a lot of people didn't understand how the Saturn V was put together. But for Braun's like, hey, dude, just pass me the checkbook and I'll get it done. All right, great. But no, let's say you're a good employee. Let's say you really do know your stuff. But you're a normal human being and you don't walk around bragging about yourself constantly. Now, there's a couple ways to pass the information around that I think is very, very productive, and you're not going to get a bad stigma about you walking around going, hey, did you see what I did, you know? One, I think it's extremely important that you understand if you're in any type of technical job, and this could be special effects to programming, you need to be priming yourself to be a manager. If you really want a safe batch of skills that can last for the rest of your life, you do. Because being a worker bee past a certain age is pretty much impossible. The main reason is as you get older, I mean, unless you're willing to live in a one-bedroom, or just you're willing to rent a room past 50, keeping your overhead absolutely at a student level, no one's going to hire you. Why hire you? You're old. If your physical appeal is part of the job, definitely you're not going to get hired because they just take one look at you and go, yeah, that's exactly what I want. I want this place to look like a bowling alley nightclub where old ladies are here to, do their thing. It's brutal. It's stupid. It's unfair. Trust me, I'm not condoning that behavior, but we all know that's what happens. But if you're sort of normal person past 40, hey, your car is a little nicer, your home's got some more stuff in it because you've been collecting stuff your whole life. And so eventually, your rent's more, your cost of living's more, and they don't want to pay for it because they can go get the kid fresh out of school. Thinking in their mind the kid's better than you, but he's not, but whatever, they'll take the hit in productivity because he's way cheaper. He's a fourth of what you cost. So management is a great transitional thing to move from being a worker into a manager. Well, how do you make that transition? You might think this is an off-topic situation, but it really has to do with you making sure that the hires up, if it's not your own company, and you don't have to worry about anything, your hires up need to understand what you do. And they want to see a couple things. They want to see you accomplish something quickly, so they want prolificness. They want to see you help others on the team. You may not be in a position to have others listen to you, or they may not be a part of your job or whatever. So you do the best you can. But your communication skills, aka your reporting upwards, what you do, regardless if they ask you to do this, you need to have a regimen. And you need to figure out sort of the DNA of your bosses to see if, okay, I shouldn't do this. This kind of boss wants an update every morning or the end of every day. This kind of boss wants it once a week. This one wants it once a month. This one wants it once a quarter. Even if they don't ask, you find out what the hell they're willing to tolerate. Usually no one has a problem with weekly updates or a bigger increment. So weekly, monthly, quarterly, no one has any problem receiving that. But they need to understand a couple things in your report. They need to know where you fit inside the progress report. Are you a manager already who's just telling them what all the employees did? Because eventually that might come back to bite you. So if you are mentoring your employees, you are getting them over the humps, you are training them, all that kind of stuff, that needs to be reflected in your notes. You're going to get credit. It's going to go into their brain to say, wow, that woman or that man over there is very critical to our business. Now, sometimes things get so tumultuous that they have to let you go, but it's strictly financial. But at least when you're walking out with your box of stuff, you don't feel so bad because you're like, hey, everyone's getting clipped. It's just we're running out of money. It's just that simple. The department I was in was expendable, reducible, that sort of thing. And there will be sometimes lunacy, and that you'll have employees that reported to you already, and they think they can manage those people, or those people can manage themselves, and they soon find out within 30 days, 60 days, that they really needed to keep you. But of course, now their ego's involved in making the wrong decision to get rid of you, so they stick with their bad decision to prove that they weren't wrong. This kind of crap happens all the time. And this is stuff, you can go get a PhD in business school and no one's going to tell you the stuff I'm telling you right now. This is stuff you only get if you have experience. What I'm trying to do in this episode is, one, go after the psychological frustrations that we might have wanting credit, and then trying to figure out exactly when we should pull that card out. And two, to fortify you within any type of employment that you might have by using the passive methodology of letting someone know that you did something amazing. Now, let me give you the standard little lesson of using the reference me, I, and we. It's usually I or we, right? There was a famous situation at Electronic Arts where we had this, I'll just say, this guy named Frank. And his wife was an actress in Hollywood. And there was a lot of sort of groupies at the producer level in Electronic Arts, where they always wanted to get close to someone who knew someone so they could have a golf game with a famous person or go to dinner with the famous person. It's just, it's not like we all don't want to do those things if they come around, but to artificially stimulate it when no one cares if you live or die, it's usually ridiculous. So we had this guy, and his wife was an actress, and apparently his wife was supposedly on episodes of Frasier, but I just rewatched Frasier a couple of years ago, and I could not find any woman to qualify for this particular role, but I know she's in there somewhere. So he meets one of the big producers out of EA, and that dude gave him a job. He has no experience in video games whatsoever, but he gets a super senior job. Again, he has no experience. He has no idea. He doesn't play video games. It would be just as bizarre as walking up to a taxi cab driver and going, "You're going to run my company," And it's not that he's not a bad guy or anything, but this dude was a bad guy. The first phase of his life was in the Bay Area, and what he would do was sit in his cube. I'm just giving you a character profile so you understand why the rest of the events took place and why you never want to be like this guy. But he would sit in his cube, and he was talking really loud in his phone, right? And he was saying in his cube really loud how stupid everyone else was in the department. So here are these people, these kids who are geniuses, right? Geniuses in design, geniuses, actually we didn't have too many coders in-house, but genius artists, and they just been through the machine several times. This dude's never made one game in his entire lifetime. First day on the job, he was saying that he was the best, I guess. Unbelievable. So he made enemies really, really fast, right? Well, then he transfers to Los Angeles. Nobody wanted him in the Bay Area, that's for sure. So now he goes down to Los Angeles with a little bit of time on his record in the Bay Area. And you know how that works when you start at a new location. Doesn't matter what job it is. You could be a teenager working at Dairy Queen. Anyone that was hired the day before you seems like when you walk in, you Pavlovianly think they were there forever. And you find out 2 weeks later they were there a day before you. So when he comes in to LA, he looks like he's a super senior guy. But he was a blowhard up north, and he was a blowhard down south. Then EA creates EA.com, EA LA, and they moved everyone into Playa Vista. Now this guy is condensed with a bunch of other geniuses. But he's still playing a game that he is just, the cat's pajamas? He's given a huge presentation about what his team was working on. Now, this whole presentation, he's saying, I. Now, once in the presentation, with his team in the room, is he acknowledging the fact that he works with other human beings. He's not a programmer, he's not an artist, he's not a designer, and he's a shitty producer. So what could he possibly be eyeing in this project besides coming to work, collecting a deep 6-digit figure because somebody upstairs, someone up north wants to be on a Hollywood set, which I'm willing to bet never occurred for anyone as a result of this guy. Guarantee it. Because once I got deeper into Hollywood and I was like, so your wife was on Frasier, big deal. That's probably the first and last job this lady ever had. Because they just eat up women like crazy. And if a woman survives that flash in the pants moment, she becomes legendary. And we all know her name because she's a household name. The fact that I watched the whole series and couldn't figure out who she was, pretty good sign that was just 15 minutes of fame. But anyway, one of my best friends in the whole world has to ride an elevator with this guy. And my friend has a policy, and this might sound silly, but he's told me this several times. He said, I have a policy. I never call anyone any names. I never have my whole life. And I just looked at him when he told me that. I was like, man, you've had a really blessed life then. I'll call you exactly what you are if you start to cross lines, man. Start to betray the team or betray me. Oh, you'll definitely hear what you were at that finite moment in time. I don't mean to say you're that your whole life because everyone could rehabilitate, but I'm not that skilled. But he gets in this elevator with the guy. This is my buddy. Apparently, the way he tells the story is he stops the elevator with the stop button, having just heard this presentation, because my buddy's really good about passing out credit where credit is due. And he turns to the guy, and the guy's like, whoa, what's going on? And he says, I just watched you give a presentation taking credit for over 100 employees' activities, and you never said we, and you never gave anyone any credit for anything. He goes, I just want to tell you, I think you're an asshole. Called the guy a name, right? And it was like, honestly speaking, other than maybe him having choice words for politicians, between you and I, right, if he were to call you or something, in real life, he doesn't do it. And that guy, I guess, got all huffy-puffy with him. Well, screw you, man. Now, the guy got fired eventually. And when he got fired, this Frank guy, it was like there was an email, a bulk email of the age of Aquarius that this guy lost his job. I wish him well, but I also only wish him well if he can get rid of his super acidic personality, right? That's an anecdote about a dude taking way too much credit. Now, I don't personally have his side of the story. I just know he doesn't have any technical skills in that area. Now, everyone who's smart could think things up, but his behavior in the cube up in the Bay Area, telling his first week on the job with a blank resume for video games, saying that everyone in this place is a bunch of idiots when they're cranking out billion-dollar products, right? A few $1 million to create, billions coming in the door. I mean, give me a break. Walmart walks in, Electronic Arts at its peak in, say, 2000 to maybe 2001, we would make a video game, and we'd have all the big retailers come into the company, and we have this little showroom where you can play all the video games on whatever platform you want. Walmart would walk in and buy 600,000 Maddens in one setting. Target, 500,000. Boom, boom, boom. Before those retailers walk out of the room, we've already gone double platinum. And that's before GameStop. That's before all the little guys come in and buy their copies. That's not even including 2 or 3 years worth of sales through the store, online. So to say that the kids that are paying everybody's bills, including his paycheck, are somehow incompetent, it was just an amazing, defective nucleic acid chain, let me tell you. But now let's regress back to childhood. Let's think about this for a second. If you're a parent of any kind, a grandparent, a parent, you raise your little brothers and sisters, or you got a neighbor that's got a little kid, and you're involved, you know that there's this amazing moment when a kid creates a drawing with a bunch of crayons. It doesn't look like anything, but to them, it's a work of art. And they've brought it to you, and maybe they're saying, Mommy, Daddy, look at what I did. And it's a moment where your child is using instincts inside their body. Nobody said, hey, why don't you go off and draw me a drawing and then immediately come and tell me how good it was that you did this and get credit from me, right? That's what I'm telling you to do. Go draw, then come get credit from me, and then go draw something else, and let's just keep this going until you fall asleep. You never say that. But every kid does it. You did it most likely when you were little. Okay. So it's something that's built into us, isn't it? Why the hell do we want that? We want acceptance. We want to know that we're doing things right. We also want to impress people. Imagine that. You're a tiny little kid and you're really kind of trying to impress mommy and daddy with your drawing. You know, it goes from scribbles in a kind of a little snowstorm, and then it turns into a big potato head with arms and legs coming off the one thing. It's the face is on the potato head and the arms and legs come off of it. Then your child has that epiphany where they realize there's actually different segments to the body because they see a stick figure perhaps. It evolves. The kid's always looking for the next thing to get your approval. Now, I will tell you, in my own travels, my experience was a little bit different. I don't remember that phase as much, bringing something to mommy and daddy and doing it. One, because I think that I had grandparents around me that were reinforcing me automatically, and so I wasn't in a deprivation standpoint. I'm thinking that's how it went. But like I've said several times, by the time I was 9, I was drawing and painting at, high school, upper high school level skill sets. And so what was happening for me is that I would go to school, draw, paint, do whatever, or my private painting class when I was 9. It's the only formal training I ever had before middle school and high school. And so I was getting tons of accolades at school. I was winning contests. It was like girls liked me because I could crank out whatever the hell anybody wanted. I would paint at bars when I was 14, 15 years old. I'd paint Iron Maiden album covers on walls and huge banners for the movie theater downtown on giant sheets, So I was always doing something crazy. I'd paint a business, just a ton of stuff. I got to roam around school and do Christmas decorations on the walls or, just a ton of stuff, okay? So that automated society towards me. Didn't need the parents to say a word, which is good because they didn't. Now, I'll tell you a funny story because there's a little twist to this thing. Let's say that you make the decision in your life at some point to not go and solicit credit. You're going to live in the shadows and enjoy living in the shadows, and your reward will simply be that people enjoyed what you created. And for instance, you could write a book under a pen name. You could create a movie under a pen name. Whatever it is, create a piece of artwork, something, an invention. And just happy that people ended up using it. Okay? It's very big of you first to do that. I should say, to the degree you can actually hang on to that regiment your whole life, you are a special human being. You really are. Now, I had a situation where I had, and I've mentioned this a couple times, but I figured out how to create murals on the ground or on hard surfaces using Black Cat smoke bombs. Very specifically that brand, because all the brands don't yield the color that the outside ball actually says. And even Black Cat has a few colors that go the different way, but that's okay. And so I got it into my head to do the Statue of Liberty on a racquetball. I'll put the picture in the thing for those of you on the podcast. But I had totally planned this out. Now, my hometown in Kansas, I'm flying in from California to do this. I'm using my money. I bought a case of smoke bombs. Had the kids help me sort it out, so they're all involved. It's really cool. And so the next morning, I actually called the newspaper and I said, hey, I'm going to be doing this mural on the racquetball, one of the racquetball things. I guess that's what it is. You've seen these things 100 times. Why don't you come down and take some pictures? It'll be cool. You get the making of it, and then you get the whole thing. Well, the brilliant newspaper didn't come down until much, much later, like days later. But I'm painting this Statue of Liberty, and it's like I think the minimum height was like 9 feet high. So it was kind of hard. And they're all, these things are on fire. So you have to, and they have false, they have duds that actually blast the fire out on your finger. So it goes through the wall and starts just blasting your fingers. So by the time you're done creating a smoke bomb mural, you've got holes in your fingers. I mean, for real, it's bad. And you got so much sulfur in your lungs, it's hilarious. But some of us really love that smell. So here's the funny part. This is hilarious. I told the newspaper who I was to come down and film it, but they didn't. But they come down a couple of days later, and what they find out is that the park manager, some guy in town, poor dude, he was pissed off that I had used fire to burn this mural on the cement surface, which had this really thick coating of gray paint that was used to, I guess, be a better surface to bounce a tennis ball off of. And I, literally etched it away with this fire. So he puts out this notice, we're going to find out who did this, and that person's going to pay for repainting this thing. Now, the reality is that once the rain comes, it's going to knock all the ash off. And yeah, there'll be a little bit of a mark, but whatever. But it was a Statue of Liberty. I think it was the year 2000. People driving by in their trucks, honking horns. They are loving this. They kept coming by, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. It was the Statue of Liberty's head before I realized she was Queen Semiramis, but whatever. But now get this. This is freaking hilarious. My junior high school art teacher, Mr. Bushnell, good dude, we had told him that we did this, and he thought it was funny. But he goes, so this is summertime. It's about a few weeks. I guess it's about, 2 months before school's going to start up again. So school starts up again. He's in class, and he sent us this email to let us know that this happened. It was utterly hilarious. One of his students, well, the class started talking about, man, did you see that mural down the thing? Oh, man, that was crazy. And, they still can't find who did it because whoever did it's going to have to pay. And apparently some kid in class said, oh, I did it. And the whole class just went, oh my gosh, you did it? And he's like, oh yeah, I totally did it. And da-da-da. Now he doesn't realize it's made with smoke bombs. He thinks it's made with paint, which is really funny. I don't think that was ever quite revealed. But my teacher's looking at this kid going, oh my God, this kid just took credit for the thing that Mark did. All right. So he's cool. He's a totally dapper. He's retired now. So he takes the kid back in the back room and he goes, okay, here's the deal. I'm not going to tell anyone that you're lying. But a former student of mine did that, and I know you didn't do it. And I don't know whatever happened past that point, but I just thought it was really funny that this poor kid, was in the back room getting called out by the teacher. But now it was interesting for me that, credit wasn't the game at all. I wanted everyone to get a sort of a great, 4th of July bump emotionally. I wanted to test out the technique for the very first time in a giant format. I had done, I think, the year before, no, actually in 98, I did a giant mural in front of my buddy's house that was a dollar bill where I redesigned it, but it was on a, kind of a cement ground. You could only see it if you got up on a ladder sort of thing. So, but I got heat stroke that day. Oh my God, it was so rough. I had a headache for hours after that. But the bicentennial or the Statue of Liberty thing was a real interesting moment for me because it never came out that I did it. Eventually I let some years pass. I started because Facebook didn't exist, but eventually I posted it here and there. No one gives a crap, right? Which is good. I didn't care. But everyone loved it. That was cool. And a kid liked it so much he took credit for it. You wouldn't take credit for something that you didn't respect, right? You wouldn't be like, oh, I'm the one that crashed the car into the parked car and left it there and walked off. I mean, no one takes credit for that kind of stuff. So I thought it was kind of a double whammy, a little bit of an education for me personally. Now, let's rewind time in this episode to say we, I think, have established pretty convincingly that credit is something that we want as children. We want personal credit for it. There is a personal validation that you've developed techniques that are worth, hey, that's really good, a pat on the back. We also know that it is used as a vehicle to get approval from people, when we're super young, it's people getting approval for our parents for love. When we want friends, we might show them something really cool and they want to be your friend because you're constantly cranking out cool stuff. That's cool. So as you see this game continually played in an adult realm, you have to just monitor exactly how it's being applied to a situation to understand the intent of that credit. I think most people will tell you that as you get older, it's best to let someone else give you credit than for you to extort it out of them. One of my biggest gripes with President Trump was his need to constantly tell you how great he was. Now, I'm not bashing that guy's overall performance. I'm just telling you that's one thing that never felt right with me because I've decided not to be that kind of person. And it's unnecessary, right? If you save the free world, let's just say that's your accomplishment as a political leader, which didn't happen, but at least it hasn't happened yet. Today's Inauguration Day. Then you don't need to tell anyone how amazing you are. People just will do it for you. They'll build statues of you. They'll carve your face in a mountain. It just happens. And that's true greatness. So as an adult, when you see people try to get credit for things and try to link themselves to other people who are amazing, that's one of the biggest ones in LA that is gross, and I try to manage it on this show, which is if I told you I knew a famous person, I'm not going to tell you, there's no value to that unless I've done something with the famous person that is equally impressive, right? Just knowing someone, oh, I met so-and-so, I met Kelsey Grammer, who played Frasier. I met him at the Bel Air Country Club. I was waiting for my car, and he's standing there to my left all by himself, taking off his golfing gloves. And I look over at him, and he's looking at me, and he's got this kind of smile on his face, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And I said, I know you. And he laughed. And then he came over to me and asked me how my day was, and I was kind of bummed that I was waiting to get my car to leave. It'd be nice to meet him when I can sit and chat with him. But that was just me meeting him. I did nothing with the guy. It was a happenstance situation. Okay. But if I meet all these celebrities and help build their brands and help them get jobs on SNL or debut a product or something, well, then that's something I can tell you. But I don't need to tell you in a way that I need you to acknowledge, oh, well, that's so amazing. That's so good. You did that. I'm just telling you, just in case that helps validate a conversation between the two of us, or it's some interesting thing we're talking about. But that's it. But a lot of people will name drop, as you know, as if, I don't know. It is weird. Like if I went back to my hometown, this is my assumption. There's going to be some people that if I were to be this big name dropper and boom, 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 they're going to, one, if they're mature, I think they're going to find me very obnoxious. Some people are going to be those folks that are just like, tell me another story. And they really are cheering for my life and all that kind of stuff. That's probably a really slim group of people, probably a younger group of people, even if they have an old body. They're a little younger in the head. So you got to feel that out and maybe entertain. But eventually, you will start getting nauseated with the game if you have a modicum of maturity in you. What am I doing? Well, my whole life is dropping names constantly of people I met that won't even return my phone call. I mean, it's like, you don't even know them anymore. It's like, all right, if it's pertinent to the conversation, someone mentions that name, oh my God, I love this person. I think he or she is fantastic, this or that. You can go, it's funny, man. I used to know that person and used to do this, do that. That I think works. So one of them is a mechanical sort of resume validation, which is to ensure those that could employ you, those that will part with money, understand your capabilities. And then there's the vanity side of things, which is perhaps you're just telling a story to entertain a room. Maybe something amazing happened. I'll give you one as an example. This one's kind of funny. I think I told this one time in a previous episode. I had, regular meetings with LL Cool J in my North office in LA in Culver City. One time he comes in, and every time you meet this guy, he's got to get off the shoot for his NCIS LA show. So we would literally wait, a couple hours while he's finishing shots, and he drives straight from there to our place. And of course, he's starving to death, and he's a very health conscious person. He's a monster, man. And he had this, I think it was an orange, a gigantic orange. And he's starving. And so he comes in, he sits down, and we're showing the progress. I'm always the guy showing him the progress. And so I'm busy. I'm working on the presentation. And, after a while, that guy is so professional, it's just no big deal. But he was eating this orange, and he was tearing apart this, which was massive. And he has these huge hands anyway. And so he's tearing apart this orange and just feeding himself. And I'm thinking it's totally normal because it's an orange, man. He's starving to death. Good choice in food, right? Well, then he leaves. It's cool. We're going on about our day. It's real late at night. And then we always do kind of a little jam session afterwards at the time. And my employees were like, God, did you see how he ate that orange? I was like, what do you mean? Oh my God, he just devoured that orange. It was so huge, and he just ate that thing in like 60 seconds. And I was like, oh, I didn't have the ability to pay attention to that. But that orange moment was like an inside joke. It was an impressive thing that he did, not anything else. But they kept talking about the orange, man, for weeks after that, right? So there's a little entertaining anecdote that you might drop if you have something that's related to the situation. You're not trying to get credit for being with the person who's really accomplished in this world. Now, the one that I have found that's really weird, because I'm going to give you two stories. I'll give you a story at Bel Air Country Club. I think I've said this once before, but we were being introduced, my buddy and I, Richard Taylor and I, we had this LED 3D theater thing all worked out, ready to go. Now we just needed investors. So we're introduced to a few folks, and we end up going to Bel Air a lot. So we get introduced to this guy whose name happened to be Frank as well, different type of Frank. And Frank was just kind of he's an interesting guy. He really knew his stuff really, really well. But when you meet someone as an investor, you always got to treat him like a snake oil salesman or a shyster, just to make sure you make him fight for it. And everybody knew Richard's background because he was a famous director. He was on Tron, But now nobody knows really who I am, and no one seems to be asking, why am I there? Which I just thought was kind of strange. So usually we do little, roundabouts to say, what's your background? Why are you here? What are you responsible for in the company? At the time, I was the CEO. And my buddy was not really wanting to take the CTO because he wasn't. I was that too. So he was more like the visionary, and it was great. But I remember, so we sat down for lunch, and there was like a big pause. And so I said, somehow I was introducing myself to Frank across the table. And I wanted to just tell him how I built Zero G Games and made quite a bit of money in that. And so I just sort of said, hey, my name's Mark, blah, blah, blah. Shake his hand. I said, my background's this. And I built this company, and we had this revenue stream, blah, blah, blah. And this guy actually looks across the table and goes something like, I'm sure you're really important. Just like that. Kind of being an asshole, With Frank, you would be like the star of the week. And then the next week, you'd be nobody. You'd lick his feet. You know what I mean? Like, it was just weird how he would behave. I think he had some serious, behavioral issues. So sometimes you try to establish yourself and you'll get those really crappy responses back. But now there's an indirect one that you might run into in your lifetime. And if you guys have other scenarios, please document them in the comments. Or if you've had the same scenario and it's important to you and you think we might learn something, most definitely take some time out and put it down below. There was a point in my life in my 20s and 30s where I had managed to gain the trust of very, very serious people. People that do not just create, they don't need any friends. And so when they take you in their circle and they recommend you to their people, it's a big deal in your brain because, you gain credibility with individuals, And my one name drop in this area is Steve Jobs. So I had won this guy over on my personal communications with him. That led to, my personal communications with him had gained enough credibility that it ended up where I was negotiating a deal between EA.com and Apple for 2 years. So it was interesting how that manifested into something very real, plus a bunch of other stuff. He tried to hire me twice, and I was a moron and was trying to protect my 50 people at EA because my boss was threatening to lay them all off, which he eventually did. But he got fired in the first round. They got laid off. He got fired. It was nice. The other one is that there are various folks in Hollywood that are very tough to get to. They don't want any friends, and I gained their trust and became extremely good friends to the point where one of them said to me, he goes, I only have 2 friends and one of them's dead, and you're the other one. So it's huge. So you get entrusted, and then you realize that what you're discussing are things that are phenomenally deep and complicated and result in either big blockbuster films being created or big giant, tech deals being made in the background. So then it's obvious, usually, to you as the individual, that as you gain other opportunities of the same kind and you're trying to establish your professionalism, if someone's willing to read your resume, they may gain all that really quickly and you're off to the races. I've been in think tanks where it's like, when I get introduced, the guy running the think tank introduces me and there's barely anything for me to say after that. Just, hi, how you doing? But there'll be people like that guy at Bel Air who would never read a resume, didn't really, it was like, we're all 70. We had 3 70-year-olds in the company at the time. I think one was 71, he was 70. And he just didn't like, that was weird. He would say weird things like he had just married a woman that was 39 years old. He was 70. And he would make jokes at dinner going, well, I want Mark to take over after I die. And the whole, I'm sitting there going, like, yeah, he hasn't talked to me. He just said, I'm going to say this joke. He just says that, and we're all laughing our asses off. So I couldn't figure out, was this guy like me or not like me, man? Turns out, I don't think he likes anybody, including himself, unfortunately, because he did earn that ability. But I've had to at times, and it's been successful sometimes and been totally unsuccessful other times, to mention some of these folks I've worked with to say, yeah, I gained this trust from this person. Sometimes if they know that person really well, it clicks and then you get automatically validated up to that level. And then you can pull back from ever having to say another thing about yourself and you just get back to business because it's not about the old stories and the old stuff. I mean, there were moments in my startup with the LED theater project where I'd have a partner or someone involved in the company, we're kind of walking back from lunch and then they go, well, how well did you know Steve? They really wanted to know how many times we were in the same room with the guy. What did you do? They were interested, but somehow in a public forum, they didn't want to expose that part of my life just in case maybe it was, amazing? I don't understand it. They're willing to have all those conversations on the side. Very strange. But here is where I think the rubber meets the pavement with this particular episode, especially in a professional capacity. If you have figured out what you love to do and you want that to be your career, and you've done it before especially, if you haven't done it before, it could even be more frustrating. You've gained all the credibility from those who do what you love to do, and all you're trying to do is get an invitation into the club. That's the Hollywood problem. Man, you can hover around Hollywood. It's like all the sperm trying to get into an egg, man. It's crazy. You're just sitting there banging on this egg, trying to find a little opening. And I swear to God, when you find it, it's eureka, and things start to roll. It's just crazy. You become another life form, The thing that no one ever tells you, your mother, your father, your uncle, never tells you, is that you have to maintain a certain velocity as you are dropping your mad science and your credibility on individuals. Because what can happen is you'll be in some session. I see this all the time. I met a girl who's in her early 30s the other day, and my God, she was just a train wreck of dropping names and trying to get stuff. And then the more you let her talk about just incidental things, you start to realize, oh, this person has a serious self-perception problem. Meaning she's so insecure, she keeps talking, waiting for me to do something to give her validation so that she feels comfortable and can stop saying these things, right? And then I watched her social media for a while, and it was really bizarre. Some of the comments, just really inappropriate stuff that's going to haunt her forever. So, my opinion on how to, distribute your qualifications to get credit for what you're capable of doing would be like this. If you do it in paper form or website form, your resume's online, maybe it's your LinkedIn, maybe it's your own .com, that's probably the best way to do it, because then the person viewing your capabilities can ingest at their own will, at their own rate. It could be 2:00 in the morning, they're naked in a robe. They're getting to do it however they want to do it. That's the least impactful, disruptive way, I should say, that you can get the information to them. A lot of them will want the paper resume. Now, depending on your type of career, like my career has been all over the map. I've done like 5 distinctly different careers in my lifetime, at least. And so at that point, maybe for the particular venture you're in, you create a resume that only links to all the things that are relative to what you're doing, with just minor mentions of being in the other companies. And then when you give it to them or email it to them, you explain, this isn't my full resume. This is the part of my resume that matters. You're getting credit, you're getting validated, and this will determine your salary, this will determine your position, whether or not sometimes you're even kept in the venture whatsoever. But now, there are anomalies, right? There are anomalies where you'll have a person like my business partner, which I can't say I ever figured this guy out, to be honest. I worked with him for a year, and I just never could figure this guy out. Sometimes my business partner, Frank, he would exhibition me in front of other people. It was crazy. We'd have a huge group of like the Academy of Arts and Film, and they're looking at the technology, and he'd be like, this is Mark, bah, 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 and just lay out my whole thing, and just, it was like, it was my dad bragging about his son sort of thing. And then a week later, it was like, I wasn't fit to take out the trash. And then a week after that, I was, Tesla again in his brain. It was just the most bizarre sort of bipolar ADHD attention span deficit issue. It's really strange. So, having 2 parents, it's okay. So the one thing that's defective in my gene pool, I've noticed, it's a defective gene. I don't know how this happens. Maybe it's probably social, not genetic, but I had 2 parents that were in competition with me. The more I succeeded, one of them would silently, passively, aggressively destroy all my stuff, like destroy the history of my capability, of my accomplishments, physically destroy drawings and stuff. Just weird. And then the other one is very, very in your face. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, because I read in an article that you're wrong. Has no science background or no background in anything that you're talking about. So they don't have any experience. They're talking out their ass. But in this person's brain, they have to be the winner constantly, which shows extreme immaturity. Doesn't matter how old your body is. It's just a joke. So when I had parents like that, what was very interesting was it was the anti-force of trying to take a drawing to mommy and daddy because one of them would go, "That sucks. It doesn't look like anything." You know, I mean, that's the kind of person one of them was. And the other one would just go, "Yeah, that's great. It's really good." And then later, they take my drawing out and burn it. You know, I mean, it was just some weird thing. I'm not sure what causes that bizarre thing. It's as if they can conceive of being more impressive themselves. And so they hate the fact you're successful. It's a weird thing. So depending on what realm you're in, you could have business associates that are like my parents. And I will say that there are situations where if you can't win the person over, and this person is either your peer or your superior, you don't have a fit, man. It's never going to be good, ever. They're going to mess with you until they kick you out or cause a problem. They may, in some cases, I haven't really ever seen what I'm about to say actually take place. I have heard rumors of this sort of thing where someone will mess something up and then they've already deviously planned how to blame it on you. There's the whole thing of, this is kind of remotely related, but a lot of you know about the scam that companies pull on you, and it's a hideous thing they do. They will give you a promotion with a raise. And what they're trying to do is promote you into your inabilities so they can fire you. Like, could that person ever handle that job? Nope. Okay, promote them into that job and just start taking notes about how they're screwing everything up. If you're clever and they've completely miscalculated you, they'll just keep promoting you until they coup you out of the company. Could be the entire time they're promoting you, you're actually kicking ass and taking names. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking to get rid of you. They're looking to take your salary and add it to theirs at the end of the year with the big fat bonus. So be aware. You have to pace yourself. Let them find out what you've done in the past. I will tell you this, the most incredible geniuses that I've ever either known personally or known about virtually never, ever attempted to get a credit at one point in time. In fact, like Rod Serling, the guy that invented and wrote most of the Twilight Zones, I'm personally unaware of that guy ever being in an interview and tooting his own horn. You know, people would say things to him. They'd say, well, you know, they'd introduce him on a show, Rod Serling, blah, 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 and he'd just kind of smile and go, yeah, that was me. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think I've ever heard Steve Jobs say a single word about how amazing he was. Stanley Kubrick, I don't remember him ever saying anything remotely associated with how amazing he was. And surely these individuals understand how amazing they are, especially when they do something amazing. But I think that like Prince, who, you know, he did have his moments where he got frustrated, where people were, you know, like Sinead O'Connor was given access to his song, Nothing Compares to You, which he wrote for the family, which was an album that you should own if you like that kind of music. But it was only when his music was getting given to other people and they were getting famous and no one was mentioning Prince, he was like, hey, dude, just by the way, I wrote that song. It's now #1 around the world. So, Tesla didn't have a need for credit until people started giving credit away for the radio. And he's like, well, that guy's using 50 some of my patents or some, maybe 100 something patents of mine to create that invention. So just be aware that without me actually inventing all that technology, that guy wouldn't have any accomplishments in your eyes. I think it is extremely valuable to know about the greats of the world and how they dealt with these issues so that you will personally sort of have a reference model. It's almost a lookup table for you. What situation are you in? What goal are you trying to accomplish? Who was in a very similar situation? You look at their bios, you look at how they did or didn't take any credit. As far as I can tell, the greats rarely ever took credit and they were still able to remain the top of their game. Now, typically, there's a self-employment aspect to that quality. When you're self-employed, you get to be as amazing as you want to be, and it doesn't matter if anyone gives you a chotsky or anything like that. When you work for a company, then you have to keep everyone informed as to what you're doing at a pace that, again, doesn't exceed your modesty. Meaning like, oh, you're seen as, you don't want to have this conversation behind your back where someone in your company's going, Joe over there, yeah, you know how many times he tells me how amazing he is? Your accomplishments, if you give a report to your higher ups, it shouldn't have any adjectives about your amazingness. Let them write those adjectives about you. But let's say that you took some source code and somehow you rewrote it over the weekend or guided your employees with some epiphany that you had, and it made the code 4 times faster. And so you're definitely going to write in your status report, well, I was able to get the code to run 4 times as fast, and so I'm really proud of the team. Believe me, adjectives are going to come your way when it comes to your annual review, to someone having a conversation about you. They're going to be like, yeah, dude, that woman really just knows how to kill it. They're a staple. They're a column in this infrastructure of our company. If there's any layoffs, they're one of the last people you get rid of. But as a manager, let me just close with this little tidbit. You need to make sure that if you're the one actually doing a lot of the work, in addition to your employees, which I recommend always being a manager with your hands on, because once you become a hands-off manager, one, you personally lose connection with the actual problems. And when you get into conversations with other managers, or maybe you're pulled in for a weekly meeting or something, and someone says, well, why haven't you fixed this problem? And if you go, I don't know, let me go ask my coders how this works, you're starting to get on the chopping block, which is why you want to stay involved to the point you're like, well, we have this binary, ASCII conversion thing that's the code module we got had no documentation, so we're still trying to figure it out because we're cutting edge, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Something that shows that you understand what's going on. I'm bringing you these episodes because this is stuff no one ever talks about. And this is key to your survival. And if you are young enough that you know you're going to run into these issues, but you haven't yet run into these issues, you will know that these are gold bars you're getting out of these episodes, that you're going to have a plan where no one else has a plan. You're going to have a fundamental understanding of credit, because I gave you those examples of the little kid walking up and saying, hey, mommy, daddy, see what I did? You're going to understand this is a fundamental instinct of mankind that is only being perpetrated at older and older age brackets and more complex situations. I think my advice in the end would be, let other people write your amazing epitaph of each project that you do. Don't try to write it yourself. Anyway, hopefully that was helpful to you. And on that note, if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Especially during these interesting times, definitely bookmark the webpage somewhere in your web browser. And I would also recommend using Brave browser with DuckDuckGo search engine so you can get the actual results that you're looking for. I recently converted a friend because he's watching me on my computer because I'm showing him pictures and stuff. And he's like, what is this browser you're using? And what is DuckDuckGo? And I told him. So then 2 days later, he's on his phone. He's like, dude, the research results are totally different than Google. I said, yeah. And DuckDuckGo does not track any of your behavior, and neither does Brave. So it's awesome. Even though it's based on the Chrome engine, Adrenochrome engine, they're not tracking anything that you're doing. So you're being spied on just like anything with the routers of the world that steal all of our traffic and that kind of thing. But at least this private company isn't going to gather up your stuff and sell it to Cambridge Analytics, so that's good. But on the website, we have all the video, all the audio, all the social media. We have an all-new remastered Season 1 on its own channel. We have a store with 2 shirts left, 2 brand new ones for Season 6, with the all-new Deep Thoughts Radio University. That shirt's going to stay up there forever. And we also have a couple ways to donate to the channel. I will definitely say I never thought that would ever make a difference in any big way on my end, but it actually does. It actually does. When at the end of the month I can transfer $100 here or there. So for any of you parting with cash, I super appreciate it. Hopefully I'm tickling your fancy, as they say. But anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.